What if I told you that you can reprogram your mind while you sleep? A neuroscientist has already proven it. Your subconscious mind absorbs information without your permission. That's why this isn't your typical relaxation audio. It's a catalyst for change. Every word in this session is designed with the exact rhythm and emotion your subconscious needs to break down your financial and mental blocks. You don't have to do anything. Just press play and let it happen. Listen tonight. Thank me tomorrow. Chapter 1. The Inner Listener awakens. There's a part of you that never truly sleeps. You don't know it by its technical name, nor do you need to. You know it by its effect. That hunch that came before reason, that feeling of something's going to change, that preceded the change by weeks, that instant when you knew the answer before anyone else even told you. That part of you is your inner listener. And tonight, while the rest of your body surrenders to rest, it will remain attentive, receiving every word that follows. For centuries, the conscious mind has received all the credit. It has been credited with intelligence, willpower, and the ability to decide. But beneath that visible layer lies a much vaster, silent, and powerful territory, working tirelessly, without asking permission, without needing applause. That territory is your subconscious, and it's not simply a repository of memories. It's an active receiver, a living antenna permanently tuned to the frequency of your dominant thoughts, your recurring emotions, and the stories you tell yourself about who you are. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is a radio station broadcasting 24 hours a day, even while you sleep. Every thought you hold for more than a few seconds becomes a signal. Every emotion you relive over and over becomes a constant frequency. And the universe, that infinite field of possibility that surrounds you, doesn't examine your stated intentions. It responds to the signal you're actually emitting. Rosa learned this in the most unexpected way. For years, she worked as a night nurse, accustomed to the long silences of hospital corridors at 3 in the morning. There, she discovered something curious. Patients who whispered words of encouragement to themselves, even while partially sedated, tended to recover more quickly than those who remained trapped in silent fear. It wasn't magic. It was confirmation of something that science is only just beginning to name. The brain continues to process emotional language even after waking consciousness has withdrawn. Rosa then began to experiment with herself. Every night, before going to sleep, she stopped mentally replaying the day's mistakes. That exhausting habit of reviewing every misspoken word, every hesitant decision. Instead, she began to whisper a single phrase: "I trust what I am building." At first, it felt artificial, almost ridiculous. But after a few weeks, something changed in the way she woke up. She no longer opened her eyes weighed down by anticipatory anxiety. She opened them with a calmness she herself couldn't quite explain. This isn't an isolated psychological trick. It's the direct application of a law that governs your entire experience. Your subconscious doesn't argue with you, doesn't question you, doesn't filter your words based on whether they're realistic or not. It simply receives them as instructions and silently begins to organize your perception, your automatic decisions, even the coincidences you start noticing, to align with what you've stated. That's why what you hear right before falling asleep matters so much. In that threshold between wakefulness and sleep, the critical mind that normally filters every new idea relaxes, almost withdraws. It's the same reason why a lullaby soothes a baby who doesn't understand a single word. It's not the literal meaning that works, it's the vibration, the intention, the gentle repetition. Consider Thomas, a man who spent much of his adult life convinced that money is never enough. It wasn't a phrase he uttered dramatically. He repeated it almost like a weather forecast, unaware that each repetition was an instruction sent to his inner world. His subconscious, a faithful and uncritical executor, orchestrated his reality to confirm that phrase time and again. Unexpected expenses, opportunities that came too late, financial decisions that seemed plagued by bad luck. The change in Thomas didn't come from a motivational course or a stroke of luck. It came from a simple practice he maintained for weeks. Before going to sleep, instead of dwelling on his financial worries, he imagined the physical sensation of tranquility he would feel if money flowed naturally into his life. He didn't visualize exact figures. He felt the relaxation in his shoulders, his breathing slower, the absence of that familiar knot in his stomach. His subconscious, which doesn't distinguish between what is vividly imagined and what is vividly experienced, began to treat that sensation as his new point of reference. This leads us to an uncomfortable yet liberating truth. You are not a victim of your subconscious. You are its author, even if you have been writing it for years without realizing it. Every phrase you repeat, every emotion you nurture with constant attention, every story you tell yourself about what always happens to you, is another line in a script that your subconscious mind is faithfully enacting in your daily life. There is a third testimony that expands this understanding from a different angle. That of Higinio, a man who for decades worked as a controller in an industrial plant, accustomed to relying exclusively on precise measuring instruments, completely skeptical of any idea related to the power of thoughts or inner words. A minor workplace accident left him convalescing for several weeks, time he spent out of sheer boredom reading materials on neuroplasticity that a relative had left him. He discovered, with the same analytical approach he applied to his work, that there was measurable evidence that repeated inner speech does indeed modify observable neural patterns, not as an inspirational metaphor, but as a documented biological process. He then decided to apply the same rigor he used at the factory to a personal experiment. For 60 consecutive nights, before going to sleep, he would repeat the same simple phrase, "I trust the process of my own mind," keeping a simple record of his general mood each morning on a scale of 1 to 10. For the first 10 days, the numbers barely moved. Around day 30, he noticed a consistent pattern. His mornings began with a noticeably higher average rating than before he started the experiment. Higinio, a man of numbers rather than faith, unwittingly became one of the most convinced advocates of this practice among his own co-workers, precisely because he had demanded evidence before believing, and the evidence, sustained night after night, eventually convinced him. Tonight, you have a unique opportunity, unlike any other, because now you know you are being heard. Not by someone else, but by the most powerful and least visible part of yourself. As you prepare for sleep, you don't need to force anything or fight against any negative thoughts that may arise. You simply need to gently offer a new frequency. Practice this before closing your eyes. Place one hand on your chest and mentally repeat, slowly and calmly, "I am being heard, and I choose what I sow." Let the phrase dissolve into your breath without needing to analyze it or believe it perfectly. Your inner listener doesn't demand absolute certainty. It demands gentle consistency. And tonight, that consistency begins. Hey, if you've made it this far, it's because this topic really interests you. So remember, the first link in the description has much more content that can help you even more. Don't miss it. Chapter 2. Dreams as Mirrors. There is a widespread belief that dreams are random noise, disordered byproducts of a brain processing the day's information without any particular logic. This idea, while convenient, ignores something ancient traditions understood long before modern science. Your dreams are not noise. They are a reflection. They are the way your subconscious returns to you, in symbols and scenes, the exact vibrational state you have been experiencing during your waking hours. When worry dominates your daytime thoughts, it's no coincidence that your nights are filled with anxieties, setbacks, and unresolved situations. Your subconscious mind is rehearsing, over and over, the emotional frequency you gave it during the day. It's not punishing you. It's showing you, with complete honesty, what pattern is governing your inner world at that moment. Aiko discovered this during a particularly difficult period in her life, when she faced the possibility of losing the small business she had built with years of hard work. Her nights were filled with strange dreams, buildings crumbling, roads closing just before she reached her destination, voices calling to her that she couldn't find. For months, she interpreted this as a sign that failure was inevitable. But a therapist offered her a different perspective. These dreams didn't foretell the future. They accurately described the emotional state she cultivated each night before sleep, a state filled with fear and resistance. The real transformation came when Aiko decided to experiment with something simple. Before going to sleep, instead of mentally rehearsing all the possible catastrophic scenarios, she began to imagine, with as much calm as she could muster, a version of herself who had already overcome the crisis. She wasn't pretending the problem didn't exist. She was simply choosing, in that threshold between wakefulness and sleep, to offer her subconscious an image other than the one of fear. Within weeks, her dreams began to change. There were fewer collapsed buildings and more scenes of doors opening, warm conversations with strangers, and cleared roads. And the most interesting thing wasn't the content of the dreams themselves, but what began to happen during the day. Decisions that had previously seemed impossible became clearer. Funding opportunities appeared from angles she hadn't considered, and people willing to help emerged almost out of nowhere. This doesn't mean that dreaming about something good guarantees it will happen exactly as in the dream. It means something deeper. Your dreams are an accurate barometer of your dominant emotional frequency. And that frequency, sustained over time, is what actually shapes your waking experience. Changing your dreams isn't the ultimate goal. It's the visible side effect of having changed your inner state before falling asleep. There is another level at which dreams operate, as a safe rehearsal space for new identities. Consider the case of Julian, a man who throughout his adult life considered himself bad at public speaking. Every time he had to present something in front of a group, anxiety paralyzed him, and his dreams faithfully reflected that fear. He appeared before audiences who mocked him, he forgot his words, he was left naked before strangers in absurd situations of symbolic vulnerability. A mentor suggested a practice that at first seemed naive. Before going to sleep, he should imagine himself speaking calmly in front of a group, feeling the natural weight of the words leaving his mouth effortlessly, seeing attentive and receptive faces. He shouldn't force the scene or analyze it. Simply feel it, like someone recalling a pleasant moment, even if it had never actually happened. Julian maintained this practice for several weeks before an important presentation at work. The night before, instead of mentally rehearsing every possible mistake, he repeated the exercise of imagining himself speaking fluently. The next day, something had changed. The nervousness didn't disappear completely, but the paralysis did. The words flowed in a way he later described as strangely familiar, as if his body had done this before. This is exactly what happens when you consciously work with your dreams and the pre-sleep threshold. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a vividly lived one. Both leave similar neural traces. Both become a reference point for your future behavior. That's why high-performance athletes visualize their movements before executing them. It's not superstition, it's real neurological training. Your task, then, is not to control every detail of your dreams, something that would be exhausting and counterproductive. Your task is to offer, in the moments just before falling asleep, a clear intention and a genuine emotion that will serve as raw material for what your subconscious will construct during the night. You don't need elaborate scripts or perfect visualizations. You need emotional sincerity, however brief. A third account, Nazario's, reveals another dimension of this same principle. As a commercial pilot undergoing a particularly demanding recertification process, Nazario began experiencing recurring dreams of losing control mid-flight, a pattern that, far from diminishing, intensified as his exam date approached. A psychologist specializing in high-performing professionals explained that these dreams were not omens or character flaws, but rather a faithful reflection of the anticipatory tension he carried during his waking hours, exacerbated by the habit of mentally rehearsing, just before falling asleep, all the possible scenarios for failure during the exam. Nazario decided to completely reverse that habit. In the weeks leading up to his evaluation, he dedicated the minutes before sleep to mentally rehearsing, with deliberate calm, a flawless execution of each procedure he needed to master, feeling the confidence of his own hands on the controls, the clarity of his own judgment in the face of any eventuality. His dreams changed remarkably in a matter of 2 weeks, and although aviation-related dreams didn't disappear entirely, their emotional quality transformed from panic to serene control. On the day of his recertification, Nazario described a feeling of calm familiarity with each procedure, as if his body had already successfully rehearsed each movement countless times before the actual test. Tonight, before you close your eyes, choose a single image, yourself, now calm, now resolved, now at peace with the situation that worries you most right now. Don't force it, just observe it. Feel it for a few seconds and allow it to be the last conscious impression you give to your subconscious mind. Whisper softly, "My dreams reflect the peace I choose tonight." And trust that, while you sleep, that peace will continue working, silent and precise, long after you have stopped consciously thinking about it. Chapter 3. The Symphony of the Heart. For a long time, it was taught that the brain was the sole command center of the human body, the exclusive place where thoughts, decisions, and intelligence originated. But research on the heart's electromagnetic field has revealed something that contemplative traditions have known for millennia. Your heart generates an electrical field several times more powerful than that of your brain, a field measurable at a certain distance outside your body. It is not just a muscle that pumps blood. It is, in a literal sense, a transmitter. This completely changes how you understand the manifestation of your desires. Simply thinking something intensely isn't enough. What truly sends a powerful signal to your environment and your own subconscious is what you feel, sustained over time from the center of your chest. Lucia experienced this in a way she later described as the break I needed. After the abrupt end of a long-term relationship, she found herself trapped in a cycle of resentment that drained her energy every night. She mentally replayed every conversation, every reproach, every perceived betrayal, convinced that keeping that indignation alive was a form of self-justice. But her body began to speak out. Constant insomnia, chest tightness, a weariness that no amount of rest could relieve. One day, more out of exhaustion than wisdom, Lucia decided to try something different. Before going to sleep, instead of dwelling on her resentment, she placed her hand on her chest and tried to recall, even briefly, a feeling of genuine calm. Something as simple as the memory of a sunny afternoon without any particular worries. She didn't immediately forgive the person who had hurt her. She simply allowed her heart, for a few minutes, to stop beating with the frequency of bitterness. The first few nights, she didn't notice any dramatic changes. But after about 3 weeks of consistently maintaining this practice, she began to notice something curious. People around her, without her asking, started treating her with a different kind of warmth. Work situations that had previously caused friction began to resolve themselves more smoothly. It wasn't a sudden external change, but rather a series of small adjustments that, added together, completely transformed her daily experience. What Lucia experienced was neither a coincidence nor a simple placebo effect. Her heart's electromagnetic field, by changing frequency, began to influence both her own nervous system and the subtle interactions she had with those around her. There is evidence that the human heart can synchronize its rhythm with that of another person nearby, even without direct physical contact. When you emit heart coherence, that is, a stable and genuine emotional state, the people around you tend to respond more receptively, almost without knowing why. Marco, a salesman who for years struggled with constant rejection at work, discovered something similar from a different angle. Every sales call he made was charged with a barely perceptible tension, a mixture of neediness and fear of no. His clients, unable to explain it rationally, felt this tension and responded with distrust. A colleague suggested a simple practice. Before each call, take a few seconds to genuinely appreciate the person on the other end of the line, even if you haven't met them yet. Marco thought it sounded too simple to be effective. However, he decided to try it out of sheer desperation. Before dialing each number, he took a deep breath and held a feeling of genuine appreciation in his chest, imagining he was speaking with someone he truly wanted to help. The change in his results wasn't instant, but it was noticeable over the course of a few weeks. The conversations felt different, more fluid, less defensive on the part of his callers. His conversion rate improved in a way that even his superiors couldn't explain with the usual sales metrics. This is the master frequency that governs much of your ability to manifest. Not isolated thought, but feeling held from the heart. When you genuinely feel gratitude, appreciation, calm, or joy, you not only enhance your internal experience, but you also send a measurable signal out into the field around you. A signal that your own subconscious interprets as taking precedence over any other instruction. This doesn't mean you should suppress difficult emotions or feign calm when you're not calm. Authenticity matters deeply. The subconscious easily recognizes the difference between a genuine emotion and a forced mask. What you're being invited to practice is something different. Finding, even in the midst of difficult circumstances, a small space of genuine feeling, however brief, and holding it with as much sincerity as possible. Fermina's testimony adds a third revealing dimension to this principle, particularly in the context of caring for others. As the caregiver for a family member with a long-term medical condition, Fermina spent years operating from a state of constant tension, convinced that anxious vigilance was the only genuine way to demonstrate love and responsibility. Over time, she noticed that her family member seemed to reflect, almost like an emotional mirror, the tension she herself carried, becoming more agitated and restless precisely when she felt most overwhelmed internally. A nurse with years of experience pointed out something Fermina hadn't considered. Patients, especially those with diminished cognitive abilities, are often extraordinarily sensitive to the emotional state of those around them, responding much more to the energy field of calm or tension than to the specific words used. Fermina then began practicing, before each shift, a few minutes of deliberate heart coherence, feeling genuine love and calm before entering the room. The change in her relative's behavior was noticeable almost immediately, a reflected calm that no verbal instruction had previously been able to produce. Tonight, before you go to sleep, place your hand on your chest. Recall a person, a place, or a moment that evokes genuine gratitude within you, without demanding that it be perfect or grand. Allow that warmth to expand from your heart to the rest of your body for a few minutes. You don't need elaborate words. You simply need to feel, with the utmost honesty and trust, that this feeling will continue to resonate long after you have fallen asleep. Chapter 4. The language of vibration. You've spent a good part of your life believing that the content of your words is all that matters. That if you say the right phrase with the right structure at the right time, something will change. But your subconscious doesn't work like a word processor analyzing grammar and vocabulary. It works like an instrument attuned to the vibration behind each word, the tone, the emotion, the genuine intention behind it. This distinction explains why so many people repeat affirmations in front of the mirror for months without seeing any real change in their lives. It's not that affirmations don't work, it's that they repeat them in a flat, mechanical voice, devoid of the emotional charge that truly communicates something to the deeper layers of the mind. This was exactly the case for Valentina, a woman who for almost a year maintained a daily routine of affirmations about abundance and prosperity. Every morning she stood in front of the mirror and recited carefully chosen phrases from self-help books. However, her financial situation remained virtually unchanged, generating growing frustration that she began to perceive as a personal failure. A chance encounter with a singing teacher offered her a perspective she had never considered. The teacher explained that when we sing an intention, rather than simply stating it, we activate different brain regions, linked more directly to emotion and less to rational analysis. Singing, to some extent, bypasses the critical scrutiny of the conscious mind. That part of you that constantly questions whether you deserve what you're claiming. Valentina decided to experiment. Instead of reciting her affirmations in a mechanical voice, she began to hum them softly, almost like a lullaby directed at herself. At first she felt awkward, even a little ridiculous, singing to herself in front of the mirror each morning. But she persevered with genuine curiosity, allowing her voice to find spontaneous little melodies for phrases like "money flows to me easily" or "I deserve to receive gracefully." The first few weeks didn't bring dramatic changes, but something subtle began to stir within her. The frustration that had previously accompanied her morning routine was gradually replaced by a feeling of lightness, almost playfulness. And it was precisely this internal shift, more than the specific words she used, that seemed to open a door. In the following months, unexpected job opportunities began to arise, some from contacts she hadn't heard from in a while, others entirely new. The case of Ignacio, owner of a small neighborhood bakery, illustrates this same principle from another angle. For years, his business barely survived, and his attempts to think positive felt forced, almost like another obligation to add to his long list of daily worries. One day, almost by chance, he began to hum as he arranged the freshly baked bread on the shelves. Simple, wordless melodies, letting his humming carry the silent intention of gratitude for having his own business, for the capable hands that worked, For the customers who did come, however few they were. Over time, without him consciously planning it, that morning, humming became a ritual. Customers began to comment that there was something different about his bakery, a warmth difficult to describe. Word of mouth spread organically. Ignacio understood, even though he had never formally studied it, that he had discovered something profound. When you sing your truth, whatever it may be, you communicate directly with the most receptive layers of your mind, bypassing the resistance that analytical thinking typically offers to statements you don't yet feel are entirely true. This doesn't mean you need to become a singer, nor that every intention must have an elaborate melody. The underlying principle is broader. The subconscious responds to vibrational sincerity, not to perfect syntax. When your voice, tone, and emotion are aligned, even a simple phrase carries more transformative power than an elaborate speech delivered without genuine feeling. There is a third case that illuminates this principle from a completely different context. That of Aparicio, a lawyer who for years defended arguments in court with impeccable rhetorical technique, but with a voice that his own colleagues described as correct but cold. Despite the strength of his written arguments, his oral presentations rarely moved judges or juries in the way he hoped. A communication coach pointed out something that no law course had taught him: the way he modulated his voice, particularly the rising or falling tone at the end of each key phrase, communicated as much emotional information as the literal content of his words, and his habitual pattern conveyed unconscious doubt, even when the argument itself was sound. Before each important hearing, Aparicio began practicing reading his central arguments aloud, paying deliberate attention not to the content, but to the vibration and conviction in his own voice, allowing his tone to descend with genuine firmness at crucial points instead of rising with the usual uncertainty. The change in how his arguments were received was remarkable, not because he had altered their legal content, but because the vibration behind his words now communicated the same certainty he felt internally but had previously been unable to convey clearly. You can apply this principle tonight. You don't need to sing out loud or worry about sounding in tune. Simply, as you prepare for sleep, choose a single word that represents what you most wish to cultivate in your life, whether it's calm, abundance, love, or clarity, and gently hum it in your mind, letting the tone, rather than the literal meaning, become a kind of lullaby directed at your subconscious. Allow this inner melody to accompany you as sleep arrives, without needing to analyze or have specific expectations about what should happen next. Trust that the sincere vibration of this night will continue to resonate in the deepest layers of your being, even when your conscious mind has stopped paying attention. Chapter 5. The Power of Surrender. There's a paradox that runs through much of the spiritual wisdom of all cultures. The more you cling to an outcome, the further it slips away. And the more you loosen your obsessive control over how and when something should happen, the more space you give it to manifest. This isn't passivity or resignation. It's a different kind of strength, less noisy, but infinitely more effective than desperate striving. Simone spent most of her adult life convinced that absolute control was the only guarantee of security. She organized every detail of her existence with almost military precision, packed calendars, endless lists, constant vigilance over every variable that could affect her plans. She lived exhausted, not from a lack of success, but from the silent toll of maintaining that level of tension for years. Her goals were achieved, yes, but at a physical and emotional cost that she herself was beginning to recognize as unsustainable. The breaking point came, as is often the case, not by choice, but out of necessity. A mild but persistent illness forced her to rest for almost 3 weeks, a time during which, for the first time in years, she had absolutely no control over her routine. At first, the anxiety was unbearable, but by the second week, something had changed. She began to notice that without her constant intervention, certain matters she believed depended entirely on her direct effort were resolved anyway, sometimes even better than she herself would have managed them. This experience revealed something to him that no previous reading had managed to convey so clearly. There is a greater intelligence constantly at work, one that doesn't need your constant supervision to orchestrate the details in your favor. Your role isn't to force every cog, but to offer clear direction and then trust that the process will find its way, often along paths your logical mind could never have devised. The case of Bruno, a carpenter who dreamed of opening his own workshop, offers a different illustration of the same principle. For years he tried to save the necessary capital through an almost obsessive effort, taking on extra jobs until he was exhausted, denying himself any rest, convinced that only extreme sacrifice would lead him to his goal. However, the harder he worked, the more unforeseen events arose that consumed his savings. Unexpected repairs, medical expenses, urgent family situations. A close friend, observing his burnout, suggested something that Bruno initially considered counterproductive: slowing down, allowing himself regular breaks, and instead of obsessively calculating every penny saved, simply trusting that the money would come in at the right time if he remained consistent and didn't burn out. Already exhausted, Bruno decided to try it almost as a last resort. He began taking a full day off each week, something he had previously considered an impossible luxury. In the following months, without him being able to fully explain it, circumstances began to align in ways his previous efforts had never achieved. A longtime client offered him a generous advance on a large project. A retail space became available with unusually favorable lease terms just as he was beginning to look for a place to live. Neither of these events was a direct result of extra effort. They were the result of a different inner state, one where tension had given way to genuine confidence. Your subconscious interprets constant tension as a sign of scarcity, of imminent danger, that something is wrong. When you live in that prolonged state, your entire system organizes itself for immediate survival, not for expansion or creation. Conversely, when you release that desperate grip, even while maintaining a clear intention, you send a completely different signal. One of security, of sufficiency, of openness to what is to come. Surrendering, in this context, doesn't mean abandoning your goals or ceasing to act toward them. It means releasing the compulsive need to control every variable of the process. It's the difference between planting a seed and then digging it up every day to check if it's growing, versus planting it, watering it regularly, and trusting that the natural germination process will do its work without your anxious supervision. Think about your own current goals. How many of them are you pursuing from a place of constant tension, obsessively checking every sign of progress, convinced that only your ironclad vigilance can guarantee the outcome? And ask yourself honestly, has that tension brought you closer to what you want, or has it simply exhausted you without actually accelerating the process? Petronila's journey adds a third, particularly useful perspective, this time from the realm of parenting. As a first-time mother, she spent the first few months convinced that any moment of rest amounted to neglect, obsessively checking every detail of her baby's development, constantly comparing it to growth charts and comments from other mothers, in a state of vigilance that left her exhausted and, paradoxically, increasingly anxious rather than more confident. A pediatrician with years of experience offered a simple yet transformative observation. Babies, with their remarkable sensitivity, tend to reflect the nervous state of their caregivers, and the mother's constant anxiety, far from protecting the child, often resulted in increased irritability and restlessness in the baby himself. Petronila decided to experiment with deliberately loosening some of that excessive vigilance, trusting more in her own intuition and her son's natural developmental process. The change was not only in her own mood, which became noticeably more stable, but also in her baby's behavior, who began to sleep more regularly, as if he too had been responding, all this time, to the invisible tension she carried. Tonight, you have the opportunity to practice something different. It's not about giving up on desires or feigning indifference to what truly matters to you. It's about planting your intention clearly and then consciously loosening the grip that holds it. Before going to sleep, identify a specific situation you've been trying to control with excessive tension. Take a deep breath and repeat to yourself, "I allow this to resolve itself without my forcing it." Feel, even if only for a few moments, how your shoulders relax, how your jaw softens, how your entire body is given permission to rest from the constant effort. Trust that letting go is not the same as giving up. It is, in fact, the highest form of trust you can offer to the intelligence that governs your life beyond what your conscious mind can calculate. Chapter 6. The frequency of faith. There is a vast difference between faith and certainty based on visible evidence. Certainty waits for proof before feeling secure. Faith feels certainty first, and the evidence comes later, as a natural consequence of that sustained inner frequency. This distinction, though subtle, marks the exact point where many people get stuck, waiting to see to believe. When in reality, the correct order works exactly the opposite. Delia understood this at a time in her life when external circumstances offered little reason for hope. She had suddenly lost her job. Her savings barely lasted a few months, and the responses to her job applications, when they arrived at all, were negative. Logic suggested constant worry. However, Delia decided to try something different. Instead of waiting for a concrete job offer to bring her peace of mind, she chose to cultivate that peace first, without waiting for external validation. Every night, before going to sleep, instead of mentally reviewing her list of financial worries, she allowed herself to feel, even if only for a few minutes, the physical sensation of the stability she sought. She didn't pretend the problem didn't exist. She simply chose, deliberately, to internally generate the feeling she associated with a settled life. Relaxed shoulders, calm breathing, that hard-to-describe feeling that everything is going to be all right. Those close to her, skeptical of what they considered an unrealistic attitude, constantly suggested she worry more, that she take the situation seriously. But Delia maintained her practice with quiet discipline. Weeks later, she received an unexpected call from a former colleague mentioning a vacancy at a company completely different from the sector she had initially searched in. The interview flowed with a naturalness she later described as strangely easy, and the offer arrived just a few days later, with even better conditions than her previous job. The interesting thing about this story isn't simply that Delia got a job, something that could have happened anyway. What's relevant is the inner state from which she navigated that period of uncertainty, and how that state, sustained with unwavering consistency, seemed to attract solutions from completely unexpected angles, impossible to have devised through conscious planning. Teodoro's journey offers a complementary perspective. As a freelance musician, he faced the constant challenge of generating a stable income in a notoriously unpredictable industry. For years, his relationship with money was marked by scarcity. Each gig felt like an isolated victory in the midst of an endless battle. A mentor pointed out something that fundamentally changed his perspective. Teodoro didn't need to wait for abundant wealth to feel prosperous. He could choose to experience genuine prosperity in small, everyday moments, regardless of the exact figures in his bank account. Teodoro then began to practice something simple, yet powerful. Every time he enjoyed a simple meal, a sunny afternoon, or a pleasant conversation with a friend, he allowed himself to fully experience that present abundance, without conditioning it on future financial success. Over time, this practice transformed his entire relationship with money. He no longer pursued every opportunity out of fear of scarcity, but rather from a stable sense of sufficiency. And remarkably, opportunities began to multiply. Unexpected collaborations, invitations to projects he hadn't even heard of before, and a steadily growing audience without aggressive promotional campaigns. Your subconscious mind, as you've already learned, doesn't distinguish between what is objectively true in this moment and what you feel with genuine conviction. When you maintain a frequency of faith, that is, the anticipatory feeling that something good is on its way, regardless of the current evidence, you begin to send clear instructions to your subconscious mind, which in turn begins to organize your perception, your automatic decisions, and the opportunities that your attention manages to capture. This doesn't mean ignoring the present reality or denying the genuine challenges you face. It means consciously choosing not to let those challenges completely define your dominant emotional frequency. You can acknowledge a real difficulty and, at the same time, cultivate the sense that there is a path forward, even if you can't yet see it clearly. There is a third story that enriches this understanding from the perspective of recovery after a significant loss. Leocadio, a widower after a long marriage, faced particularly difficult nights, convinced that the loneliness he felt would be a permanent and inevitable condition of his remaining life. His daughter, concerned about his prolonged emotional state, suggested a simple practice. Instead of waiting to feel better before allowing himself small moments of enjoyment, he could deliberately choose to cultivate brief moments of connection and joy, trusting that this frequency, sustained consistently, would eventually attract companionship and renewed purpose, even if he couldn't yet imagine exactly how. Leocadio began attending a community gardening group, not because he expected to immediately resolve his loneliness, but simply because he felt a mild, genuine curiosity about the activity. Over time, without actively seeking it, he began to develop sincere friendships within the group, with people who shared not only an interest in plants, but also similar experiences of loss and rebuilding. What Leocadio later described as a second chance at genuine human connection arose precisely from having maintained a small frequency of openness and faith, even when the initial evidence of his life seemed to suggest that his loneliness would be permanent. It is worth noting that this frequency of faith does not require naivete or denial of present reality. Rather, it requires the discipline of holding an open possibility, even when immediate evidence does not yet confirm it, a skill that, like any other, is strengthened by repeated practice night after night. Tonight, identify an area of your life where doubt has been governing your inner frequency. Instead of seeking external proof to justify your hope, allow yourself to feel, even briefly, the anticipated sense of resolution. Take a deep breath and mentally repeat, "I believe because I feel it, not because I already see it." Let this phrase gently settle into your body as you drift off to sleep, trusting that the faith held tonight will continue to work silently long after you have ceased consciously thinking about it. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you that if what you see here resonates with you, you'll find much more learning material in the first link in the description. Chapter 7. The Night Workshop of Creation. While you sleep, something happens that most people never stop to consider. Your subconscious mind doesn't rest along with your body. It continues working, organizing information, solving problems that your conscious mind didn't even manage to address during the day. And most fascinatingly, it continues receiving instructions based on the last emotional impressions you gave it before closing your eyes. This makes sleep far more significant than a simple period of biological rest. It is, in a literal sense, an active workshop of creation, where the rigid narratives of your waking mind soften, allowing solutions, connections, and possibilities to emerge that seemed completely out of reach during the day. Wendy experienced this firsthand during a particularly demanding period in her design career. She was facing a persistent creative block on a major project, and the more she consciously tried to find a solution, the more elusive it became. Frustrated, she decided to try something different at a colleague's suggestion. Before going to sleep, instead of mentally forcing herself to search for ideas, she would simply pose the question calmly, without demanding an immediate answer, and then allow herself to relax completely, trusting that her subconscious mind would continue working through the night. The first night yielded no obvious results, but by the third night of this practice, Wendy awoke with an extraordinarily clear image in her mind, a design solution that combined elements she had never consciously considered together. It wasn't an isolated stroke of luck. It became a regular tool in her creative process, posing specific questions before bed and trusting that her subconscious, freed from the critical vigilance of the waking mind, would find connections that daytime logic couldn't reach. This phenomenon has a basis that goes beyond mere personal anecdote. During sleep, particularly in certain phases where brain activity patterns shift, the mind accesses a different processing mode, less linear, more associative, capable of connecting scattered information in ways that the sequential logic of wakefulness rarely allows. Numerous scientific advances and inventions throughout history have arisen precisely from these kinds of processes, ideas that arrived fully formed in dreams after prolonged periods of fruitless, conscious effort. The journey of Damien, an engineer facing a complex technical problem on a construction project, illustrates this same principle from another angle. After weeks of unsuccessfully trying to solve a structural challenge, he decided, almost out of desperation, to adopt a different bedtime routine. Instead of endlessly reviewing blueprints and calculations, he opted to create a relaxing soundscape in the minutes before sleep, playing soft instrumental music and simply trusting that his mind would find its way without the constant pressure of direct effort. One morning, Damien woke up with a complete solution forming in his mind, one that combined two technical approaches he had never considered integrating. He implemented it the next day with excellent results. What Damien later described as an unexpected gift was, in reality, the direct consequence of having created the right conditions for his subconscious to work without the constant interference of his analytical mind. This doesn't mean you should passively wait for solutions to arrive without any prior conscious effort. The process works as a collaboration. The waking mind poses the question, gathers relevant information, clearly defines the challenge, and then, in the moment of letting go before sleep, hands that material over to the subconscious mind to continue the work overnight. Your sleep doesn't distinguish between what you consider possible or impossible. It simply responds to the emotional frequency and specific intention you give it just before closing your eyes. If you fall asleep burdened with anxiety and scattered thoughts, your night will reflect that chaos. If you fall asleep with a clear question and a genuine sense of confidence that the answer will come in its own time, you offer your subconscious mind much more useful material to work with. Philomena's case offers a third illustration of this same principle, this time in the context of interpersonal conflict resolution. As a community mediator, she frequently faced particularly complex disputes between neighbors, situations where both parties seemed completely closed to any possibility of agreement. After especially difficult sessions, Philomena developed the habit of mentally posing, just before going to sleep, the specific question of how she could help both parties find common ground, without forcing an immediate answer, simply entrusting the question to her inner thoughts during the night. On more than one occasion, Philomena awoke with a mediation idea entirely different from any approach she had consciously considered the day before. A proposal that combined elements of both sides' positions in a creative way that neither had explicitly suggested. Her colleagues began to notice that her most elegant resolutions often emerged after nights when she described having let the problem rest, rather than forcing an immediate solution during the session itself, confirming time and again that her subconscious mind continued to work actively even when she stopped consciously thinking about the conflict. This nighttime workshop works best when you provide clear and specific materials, rather than vague and diffuse concerns. The more precise your question is before going to sleep, the more precise the clarity you'll receive upon waking will tend to be. Much like an artisan achieves better results when they know exactly what piece they need to carve. Tonight, before you go to sleep, identify a specific challenge you've been facing, whether it's creative, work-related, or personal. Frame it as a clear and simple question, without demanding an immediate solution. Then, deliberately release the conscious effort. Imagine a soft light entering your mind, carrying that question deep within you as you surrender to rest. Trust that, while you sleep, the nightly workshop of your inner creation will continue working silently until it offers you, when you least expect it, exactly what you need. Chapter 8. Whispers of Self-Esteem. There's a conversation you have with yourself constantly, so habitual that you rarely stop to examine it closely. It's your inner dialogue, that voice that comments on every situation, every mistake, every achievement, often without you even consciously registering it. And that conversation, more than any other external source, is what most profoundly shapes the relationship you have with yourself and, consequently, the reality you experience. Your subconscious mind doesn't distinguish between the kind words you offer others and the harsh judgments you direct at yourself. Both are registered with the same seriousness, as instructions to be followed. Every time you think, "I'm not capable of this," or "I always mess things up," you're not simply describing a temporary state. You're planting an instruction that your subconscious mind will take as operative truth, organizing your perception and future behavior to confirm that belief. Ophelia lived much of her life under the weight of a particularly critical inner dialogue, inherited in part from a demanding family environment where mistakes were never overlooked. Every small misstep, whether at work or in her personal life, triggered a cascade of self-criticism in her mind, which she considered simply being realistic with herself. It wasn't until an episode of extreme burnout led her to seek professional help that she began to notice the pattern clearly. Her inner dialogue was, in essence, a constant enemy, more severe than any external critic she had ever faced. The change began with a simple but initially uncomfortable exercise. For 1 week, Ophelia was to write down, without judgment, every self-critical thought she noticed throughout the day. When she reviewed the list at the end of the week, she was genuinely surprised by the frequency and harshness of these internal monologues, many of which she would never have allowed herself to say to another person. From then on, he began a different practice. Every night, before going to sleep, instead of mentally reviewing his mistakes from the day, he allowed himself to gently whisper his own name, followed by a phrase of genuine acknowledgement. Something as simple as, "You did the best you could with what you knew today." At first, it felt forced, almost artificial. But he patiently maintained the practice, understanding that he was literally rewriting instructions that had been repeated unquestioned for decades. Months later, Ophelia noticed changes that went far beyond simply feeling more positive. She began setting clearer boundaries in her relationships, something she had previously found virtually impossible for fear of disappointing others. She started accepting job opportunities she would have previously rejected for feeling unprepared. Her external transformation was in reality a direct reflection of a much deeper internal transformation in the way she spoke to herself. The case of Franklin, a man who spent much of his professional career convinced that the success of others diminished his own potential, offers a complementary perspective. His internal dialogue was filled with constant comparisons, phrases like, "He achieved it faster than I did," or "I'll probably never reach that level." These frequently repeated phrases not only affected his emotional state, but literally shaped the decisions he made, constantly pushing him toward excessive caution and the avoidance of risks necessary for his growth. A colleague suggested something that initially seemed counterintuitive. Instead of comparing himself to others, he should start talking to himself as if he were already the successful person he aspired to be. This wasn't about arrogance or denying his current circumstances, but about beginning to build, through consistent self-talk, the identity he wanted to inhabit. Franklin began practicing simple phrases before making important decisions. "I act like someone who is confident in their abilities," repeating them until they began to feel less like distant aspirations and more like accurate descriptions of who he truly was. This practice gradually transformed how he presented himself in meetings, negotiated opportunities, and responded to challenges. Not because external circumstances had changed overnight, but because his consistently maintained internal state began to directly influence his decisions and how others responded to his presence. The universe, as you've learned in previous chapters, doesn't primarily respond to your stated desires, but rather to your sustained state of being. Your self-image acts as a filter through which all your experience is processed. When you genuinely recognize your own worth, the world begins, in subtle yet consistent ways, to reflect that same appreciation back to you. A third testimony, that of Cornelius, illustrates this lesson from the sporting arena. As an amateur athlete competing in endurance races, Cornelius carried a particularly harsh internal dialogue during each competition, constantly repeating to himself that he was too slow and that he would never be able to improve his times. A narrative that, as an observant coach noted, seemed to manifest itself physically and literally in his performance during the final kilometers of each race, at which point his pace consistently plummeted. The coach suggested he replace that internal narrative with a simple, repeatable phrase during training. "Every step makes me stronger." Cornelio began repeating this phrase mentally, not only during races, but also, with particular focus, in the minutes before falling asleep, the night before each important competition. The change in his performance became evident within months, not because his physical capacity had changed dramatically, but because his internal dialogue stopped sabotaging. In crucial moments, the genuine effort his body was capable of sustaining. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, you have the opportunity to begin gently rewriting, without demanding perfection, the conversation you have with yourself. Whisper your own name and add a simple phrase of genuine acknowledgement. Something true, something you can stand by without feeling you're forcing a lie. Allow that phrase to slowly dissolve into your breath as sleep approaches, trusting that, night after night, this simple practice will, patiently and tenderly, reshape the inner landscape from which you construct your entire reality. Chapter 9. The Magnet of Gratitude. There is a subtle but crucial difference between wanting something and being grateful for what you already have. Desire, when rooted in lack, sends a signal of absence. It tells your subconscious that something is missing, that your present life is insufficient. Gratitude, on the other hand, sends a completely different signal. It confirms to your subconscious that you are already a recipient of goodness, that abundance is not a distant destination, but a present condition that you are simply learning to recognize more clearly. This principle, although it sounds simple, contains one of the most powerful keys to conscious manifestation. And yet, it is one of the most underestimated practices, perhaps precisely because of its apparent simplicity. Yolanda discovered the power of this principle during a period of her life marked by real and persistent scarcity. After a difficult divorce, she found herself raising 2 children alone with limited resources, facing the monthly challenge of making ends meet. Her internal dialogue, understandably, constantly revolved around what was lacking: insufficient money, insufficient time, insufficient energy. A friend suggested, almost as a last resort in the face of Yolanda's emotional exhaustion, that she begin a simple bedtime ritual, writing down, each night, 3 specific things she was genuinely grateful for, no matter how small they seemed. Yolanda, skeptical but desperate for some relief, began the practice without many expectations. The first entries were mechanical. Grateful for having a roof over my head, grateful for my children's health. Correct phrases, but devoid of true feeling. However, by the second week, something began to shift in the quality of her attention. She started noticing details that had previously gone completely unnoticed. The way the afternoon light streamed through her kitchen window, her youngest son's spontaneous laughter as he played, the comforting taste of a cup of tea after a long day. These small, seemingly trivial observations began to accumulate into something far more significant, a genuine change in the prevailing emotional frequency of her days. What happened next wasn't magical or instantaneous, but it was remarkably consistent. Yolanda began to notice opportunities she had previously overlooked: a freelance job posting that fit her schedule, a neighbor willing to exchange babysitting duties with her, a community support program she was completely unaware of. None of these opportunities appeared out of thin air. They had likely existed all along. What changed was her ability to perceive them, an ability directly linked to the emotional state from which she observed her surroundings. This is a crucial aspect that is often overlooked when talking about gratitude. It's not simply about feeling good, although that would be benefit enough. It's about a genuine shift in the perceptual filter through which you process reality. When your mind operates from a place of lack, it literally filters and prioritizes information that confirms that lack, ignoring or minimizing available opportunities. When it operates from a place of gratitude, that same filter begins to prioritize possibilities, connections, and resources that were previously invisible. Gustavo's journey, a shopkeeper struggling to grow his small family business, reflects this same principle from a different angle. After losing a major supplier, his first reaction was panic, followed by weeks of constant frustration, mentally reviewing everything that was going wrong. A business mentor, instead of offering immediate tactical strategies, asked him a simple question: what is actually working in your business right now? The question forced Gustavo to stop and acknowledge, perhaps for the first time in weeks, genuinely positive elements he had been completely ignoring. Loyal customers who kept returning, a small but dedicated team, and a favorable location for his business. He then began a daily practice of explicitly recognizing these positive elements before tackling any remaining challenges. The shift in his energy was noticeable even to his team, who began proposing ideas with greater enthusiasm, energized by a less anxiety-ridden work environment. Within months, Gustavo found new suppliers on even more favorable terms than before, and his business, far from collapsing as he initially feared, experienced sustained growth. Gratitude didn't magically solve the original problem, but it transformed the mindset from which Gustavo sought solutions, allowing him to see options that anxiety had previously obscured. It's important to understand that true gratitude isn't about denying real difficulties or forcing artificial positivity when circumstances are genuinely challenging. It's about deliberately training your awareness to recognize, alongside undeniable challenges, what is also working, present, and available. This dual awareness, far from being contradictory, is precisely what allows us to navigate real difficulties without getting completely trapped in a scarcity mindset. Salvador's journey offers a particularly valuable third perspective from the realm of physical health. After a diagnosis that required significant lifestyle changes, Salvador initially experienced his new medical care routine as an endless series of restrictions and losses. He could no longer eat certain foods, he could no longer maintain the same work pace, he could no longer ignore his own body's signals. This narrative of constant deprivation began to affect not only his mood, but, as his own doctor observed, even some indicators of his recovery. A significant shift occurred when Salvador, at the suggestion of a support group, consciously reversed this narrative toward gratitude. Instead of focusing on what he could no longer do, he began each night to specifically name what his body did allow him to experience that day, however small. This change in focus did not alter his underlying medical condition, but it remarkably transformed his adherence to treatment, his overall energy, and, according to his own subsequent medical tests, even some markers of his recovery process, an outcome his medical team attributed, in part, to the reduction of chronic stress associated with the previous narrative of constant lack. Tonight, before you go to sleep, take a few minutes to name, either mentally or quietly, 3 specific things in your present life for which you feel genuine gratitude. They don't need to be grand. They can be as simple as the warmth of your blanket, the comfort of your pillow, the calm breath moving through your body. Allow each acknowledgement to expand slightly in your chest before moving on to the next. Let this practice become your way of closing each day, trusting that, night after night, you are reprogramming your perceptual filter from lack to genuine abundance. Chapter 10. Reality as a Mirror. There is a principle that, once fully understood, completely changes the way you interpret your relationships and repeated experiences. Your external world acts as a remarkably accurate mirror of your deepest internal beliefs, especially those you have never consciously questioned. This doesn't mean you're responsible for every difficult circumstance you go through, nor that other people's actions cease to be their own responsibility. It means something more nuanced. The patterns that repeat themselves in your life, especially in your relationships, often have a direct correlation with subconscious beliefs you hold about yourself, about what you deserve, about what's possible for you. Renata experienced this particularly clearly in the realm of her romantic relationships. After 3 consecutive relationships that ended under strikingly similar circumstances, she began to suspect a deeper pattern than simple bad luck. Therapy helped her identify a belief rooted in her childhood, the feeling that genuine love was always accompanied by eventual abandonment, a belief formed from early experiences she didn't even consciously remember. This belief, held for years without question, had been operating as an invisible filter on her choices. Without realizing it, Renata was unconsciously drawn to people with patterns of limited emotional availability. people who, in some way, confirmed her deep-seated expectation that abandonment was inevitable. It wasn't that she was consciously choosing badly, but rather that her subconscious, loyal to this ingrained belief, was guiding her toward situations that confirmed her internal narrative, even when she consciously desired the exact opposite. Renata's true transformation didn't begin with the search for the right partner, but with the inner work of identifying and rewriting that fundamental belief. She began a consistent practice of speaking to herself with the tenderness she had previously sought exclusively from external sources. Every night, before falling asleep, she gently repeated phrases aimed at healing that original wound. I deserve stable and present love. I am worthy of permanence, not abandonment. The change wasn't immediate or dramatic, but as the months passed, Renata noticed something different about the people who began to appear in her life. Individuals with greater genuine emotional availability, relationships that felt less like anxious repetitions of old patterns and more like new territory. It wasn't that the universe magically sent her different people. It was that her own transformed inner state led her to recognize, value, and allow connections that she previously, from her belief in inevitable abandonment, would have unconsciously dismissed as uninteresting or too stable to be real. Emiliano's journey offers a complementary perspective from the professional sphere. For years, he held the unconscious belief that professional recognition had to be earned through extreme sacrifice and constant distrust of his colleagues, a belief formed from a particularly competitive early work environment. This belief led him to successive work environments marked by rivalries and mutual distrust, situations he interpreted as, "That's just the way the professional world is," without noticing the pattern he himself was helping to perpetuate. A significant shift occurred when, through therapy and deep reflection, he began to question that original belief. He started deliberately practicing genuine collaboration instead of automatic distrust, offering sincere recognition to his colleagues even before receiving it himself. This internal change, sustained consistently, gradually transformed the quality of his working relationships. He began attracting less competitive and more collaborative work environments, not because the professional world had suddenly changed, but because his own internal frequency, now different, drew him toward opportunities and relationships that reflected this new belief. Your subconscious mind doesn't debate with you about whether a belief is right or wrong from an objective perspective. It simply acts as a faithful mirror, reflecting in your external experience what you hold internally with the greatest consistency and emotional weight. This means that to transform repetitive patterns in your life, the genuine work doesn't primarily occur in the external realm, but rather in the loving reconstruction of your deepest internal beliefs. This requires, above all, compassion for yourself during the process. It's not about blaming yourself for the beliefs you developed, often as completely understandable protective mechanisms given your early experiences. It's about gently recognizing which beliefs no longer serve you and patiently beginning to offer your subconscious new narratives more aligned with what you genuinely wish to experience. Eulalia's testimony adds a third revealing dimension, this time in the realm of friendship. For years, she noticed a recurring pattern in her friendships. People who initially seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her, but who gradually distanced themselves or proved to be less reliable than she had hoped. A process of self-exploration revealed a belief ingrained since childhood and formed after early experiences of social exclusion that people eventually get tired of me, a belief that operated silently, leading her to subtle, self-sabotaging behaviors such as avoiding sharing genuine vulnerabilities or preemptively distancing herself before the other person could do so first. By identifying and consciously working to rewrite this belief, practicing affirmations of genuine worth in friendship each night, Eulalia noticed a gradual but consistent shift in the quality of her connections. She began allowing herself greater genuine vulnerability in her existing relationships. And interestingly, these same relationships deepened in ways that previously seemed impossible. It wasn't that entirely new people magically appeared in her life, but rather that her own transformed openness allowed existing connections to reach a depth that her old belief had been quietly blocking for years. Tonight, before you fall asleep, take a moment to ask yourself honestly, what pattern has repeated itself in my life in ways I can no longer attribute solely to chance? Without demanding a complete or perfect answer, simply allow the question to settle. Then gently whisper a new statement that lovingly contradicts that old belief. Everything I experience reflects the love and worth I recognize in myself. Let this intention dissolve into your breath as you surrender to sleep, trusting that night after night, you are offering new instructions to the faithful mirror of your reality. Chapter 11. The Garden of Thought. There's an understandable temptation, especially in a world accustomed to instant gratification, to expect inner transformation to happen as quickly as a message sent and answered in seconds. But genuine manifestation, the kind that endures and truly transforms your life experience, operates at a completely different pace, closer to the natural cycle of a seed germinating underground before any visible sign appears on the surface. This understanding, although simple in appearance, is profoundly liberating once internalized, because it frees the person who understands it from the constant anxiety of why it's not working yet. An anxiety that, paradoxically, is often precisely what interferes with the natural process of manifestation. Cecilia learned this lesson in a particularly concrete way. Through a vegetable garden she decided to cultivate in her small backyard. As a complete beginner in gardening, she expected quick results, obsessively checking each morning whether the plants showed any visible growth. Her impatience led her to overwater and unnecessarily disturb the soil to check if the roots were developing, unknowingly interfering with the natural process she was trying to accelerate. A neighbor with years of experience in gardening offered her advice that she initially received with skepticism. Plants you constantly check on grow slower than those you trust and leave alone. Cecilia decided to experiment with this principle, not only in her garden, but also as a metaphor applied to other areas of her life where she felt frustrated by the lack of immediate results, particularly in her search for a stable romantic relationship after several failed attempts. He applied a new discipline to the garden, watering with reasonable consistency without overdoing it, and then deliberately stepping back and trusting the natural process without anxious supervision. The first few weeks were difficult. The temptation to constantly check on them persisted. But over time, he noticed that the plants he intervened with, least curiously, showed healthier and more consistent growth than those he frequently manipulated. This lesson, consciously applied to her love life, transformed her entire approach. Instead of obsessively scrolling through dating apps, analyzing every interaction with excessive anxiety, she began to maintain her intention to find a healthy relationship with the same steady calm she now applied to her garden. Consistent care, without anxious supervision, trusting in the natural timing of the process. Months later, she met someone under completely unexpected circumstances. During a community activity, she had attended simply for enjoyment, without any particular expectations related to her search for love. Anselmo's journey offers a complementary perspective from the professional sphere. As a first-time entrepreneur, he expected his business to take off in a matter of months. And when that didn't happen according to his mental timeline, he began to experience growing frustration that led him to constantly change his strategy, almost erratically, without giving any initiative enough time to show real results. A mentor pointed out something important. Every abrupt change in strategy restarted the process of building trust with his audience, preventing any individual initiative from having the necessary time to mature. Anselmo then decided to commit to a single strategy for a predefined minimum period, resisting the temptation to abandon it prematurely due to a lack of immediate results. He maintained this consistency with a discipline he later described as uncomfortable at first, liberating later on. Around the fourth month of maintaining this strategy without drastic changes, he began to notice steady, slow, but genuinely sustained growth in his customer base. What he had previously interpreted as strategy failure had actually just been the natural time the process needed to unfold, time his constant changes had never allowed him to complete. Your subconscious mind doesn't respond to the volume or urgency of your statements, but to their sustained frequency over time. The constant and patient repetition of a clear intention acts gradually, like water slowly sculpting stone, not through abrupt force, but through sustained consistency over an extended period. Genuine manifestation doesn't occur as a sudden event, but as an ongoing dialogue between your inner world and the circumstances that gradually realign around you. A third story, that of Prudentius, illustrates this same principle from the perspective of learning a new language. After months of studying daily, Prudentius felt growing frustration at not being able to hold fluent conversations, constantly comparing himself to unrealistic standards of immediate progress. This impatience led him to constantly change his study method, abandoning each approach after only a few weeks without giving it enough time to show genuine results. A language teacher with years of experience explained something to him that transformed his perspective. Acquiring a new language follows a natural rhythm of consolidation that isn't always reflected in visible, linear progress, similar to a plant that seems to stagnate for weeks before a period of accelerated growth. Prudencio decided to commit to a single study method for at least 6 full months, letting go of the pressure to hear obvious weekly improvements. Around the 5th month, he experienced what he described as a sudden leap in his comprehension, a moment when conversations that had previously seemed impossible began to flow with a naturalness that months of prior impatience had never managed to produce. Remember that no seed benefits from being dug up daily to check its progress. In the same way, no sustained intention benefits from your constant anxiety about when and how it should manifest. Tonight, identify an intention you've been holding on to, perhaps with growing impatience at the lack of visible results. Allow yourself to honestly acknowledge if that impatience has been interfering with the natural process, perhaps leading to constant changes in strategy or excessive anxious monitoring. Before you fall asleep, imagine your intention as a seed already planted in fertile soil, receiving exactly what it needs to grow, without your anxiety interfering with its natural development. Whisper to yourself, "I trust in the natural timing of my own harvest." Allow this trust to settle into your body as you drift off to sleep. Chapter 12. The Emotional Currency. There is a way to understand your emotions that goes far beyond considering them mere fleeting reactions to external circumstances. Every emotion you hold with any consistency functions, in an almost literal sense, as a currency of energetic exchange, a constant transaction between your inner world and the reality you experience. This metaphor, far from being merely poetic, describes a profoundly practical mechanism. Every time you repeatedly complain about a circumstance, you are, in a sense, investing energy in the frequency of scarcity and dissatisfaction. Every time you express genuine gratitude, you are investing that same energy in the frequency of abundance and possibility. Your subconscious, like a meticulous accountant, constantly records these transactions, organizing your future experience according to the dominant pattern of your emotional investments. Perla discovered this principle during a particularly challenging period at work, marked by a tense work environment and a workload she felt was unfairly distributed. Her daily habit of complaining at length, both internally and to close colleagues, had become almost automatic, a form of venting she considered necessary and justified. However, she noticed a curious pattern. The more she complained, the more reasons she seemed to find to keep complaining. Minor inconveniences she would have previously ignored began to feel like significant affronts. Her overall perception of the work environment became progressively more negative, fueling a cycle that seemed to perpetuate itself with no end in sight. A change began when, at a friend's suggestion, she decided to experiment with consciously replacing complaining with genuine curiosity in the face of the same difficult circumstances. Instead of thinking, "This is unfair and exhausting," she began to ask herself, "What can I learn from this situation? What skill am I developing by facing this challenge?" This seemingly subtle shift gradually transformed her entire experience of the work environment. It wasn't that external circumstances changed immediately. The work environment still presented genuine challenges, but the way Perla processed them internally was completely transformed. Curiosity, unlike constant complaining, didn't drain her energy. It expanded it. She began to notice creative solutions to problems that had previously only generated frustration. Her colleagues, perceiving the change in her overall attitude, began to collaborate with her in more constructive ways. Months later, when an opportunity arose to lead a major project, it was precisely this newfound reputation for resilience and creativity that positioned her as the natural candidate. Balthazar's journey offers a complementary perspective from the realm of family relationships. For years, he maintained a tense relationship with a brother, fueled by accumulated resentments from past conflicts that they both frequently replayed in their minds, each convinced they were absolutely right in every historical disagreement. A significant family event led him to reflect on the true cost of holding on to that resentment. He noticed that every time he mentally relived past grievances, it affected not only his relationship with his brother, but also his overall emotional state, even in contexts completely unrelated to that specific relationship. He then decided to experiment with a different practice. Whenever his mind began to dwell on the old conflicts, he consciously redirected his attention to a positive memory he shared with his brother, however small. This practice, maintained for several weeks, didn't instantly resolve all the historical disagreements between them, but it gradually transformed the overall tone of their relationship. Conversations, previously fraught with underlying tension, began to flow more naturally. Resentment, no longer receiving the constant investment of attention and mental repetition, gradually lost its intensity, giving way to a lighter, more genuine connection. It's important to understand that this principle doesn't suggest suppressing genuine emotions or feigning positivity in the face of circumstances that truly warrant honest emotional processing. There's a clear difference between consciously processing a difficult emotion, which is necessary and healthy, and getting caught in a repetitive cycle of complaining or resentment that leads to no resolution but simply perpetuates the same emotional state indefinitely. The helpful question isn't, should I feel this? Since all emotions have their legitimate place. The more helpful question is, what am I repeatedly and consistently investing my emotional energy in? And is that pattern bringing me closer to or further from the experience I genuinely want to create? Aureliano's journey adds a third dimension to this principle, particularly relevant in the context of raising teenagers. During a particularly tense period with his eldest son, Aureliano noticed that his habit of constantly focusing on the young man's problematic behaviors, frequently discussing them with his partner, and internally, seemed only to intensify the distance between them, as if each additional complaint invested more energy in the conflict pattern he wished to resolve. A family therapist suggested he experiment with consciously shifting his emotional attention to moments, however small, of genuine connection with his son, explicitly acknowledging them instead of taking them for granted while focusing primarily on conflicts. Aureliano began practicing this every night, deliberately recalling a positive moment shared with his son during the day, however insignificant it might have seemed. Over time, not only did his own emotional state regarding the relationship improve, but the dynamic between them began to soften, as if reducing his constant investment in conflict had created space for the natural connection between father and son to finally breathe. Over time, this conscious attention to your emotional investments becomes an almost automatic habit, a kind of financial wisdom applied not to money, but to the far more valuable currency of your own inner energy. Tonight, before you go to sleep, briefly reflect on the emotions you've been spending most frequently over the past few days. Without judging yourself, simply observe the pattern honestly. Then, consciously choose a higher value emotion to invest in. Right now, gratitude, genuine curiosity, or simple warmth toward yourself. Smile gently, letting that warmth fill you as if you've just received something generous. Allow this emotional investment to become the last conscious transaction of your day, trusting that night after night you are recalibrating your inner economy toward genuine abundance. Chapter 13. The Color of Thought. There is a human capacity that rarely receives the recognition it deserves. Imagination is not merely a form of childish entertainment or a distraction from real life. It is, in a profoundly literal sense, the most direct instrument of communication with your subconscious, a language that precedes even words, composed of images, sensations, and nuances that your subconscious mind interprets with extraordinary precision. When you think about a problem, you don't experience it merely as a series of logical facts. You experience it with a specific emotional quality, almost as if each worry has its own nuance, its own texture. Anxiety, for example, often feels sharp, almost electric, while calmness tends to feel soft, diffuse, enveloping. This sensory quality of your thoughts is not an irrelevant detail. It is, in fact, the very language your subconscious understands more clearly than any rational analysis. Damaris discovered the power of deliberately working with this sensory quality of her thoughts during a period of generalized anxiety related to the health of a close relative. Each time her mind returned to worry, the sensation was intense, almost physical. A weight in her chest, a tension that wouldn't leave her even during simple, everyday activities. Conventional attempts at positive thinking felt empty, almost offensive in the face of the very real gravity of the situation she was facing. A therapist suggested a different approach. Instead of trying to change the literal content of her thoughts, something that felt impossible, Given the genuine seriousness of the circumstances, she could work with the sensory quality of those thoughts. When worry arose with its usual gritty, urgent texture, Damaris began practicing imagining that same worry bathed in a soft shade of lavender, not denying the content of the worry, simply softening the way she held it internally. The exercise at first seemed strange and even slightly absurd. But with repeated practice, Damaris noticed something genuinely surprising. Although the external situation remained as serious as before, her ability to cope without collapsing under the weight of anxiety improved considerably. She could make clearer decisions regarding her relatives' care, communicate more calmly with the medical team, and keep her own energy available to support other family members who were also going through the process. This practice didn't resolve the medical situation itself, something that was beyond the reach of any mental technique. But it radically transformed the quality of Damaris's internal experience as she navigated that difficult reality, allowing her to be present in a much more sustainable way than if she had remained trapped in the original, raw anxiety. Casimiro's journey offers a complementary perspective from a completely different context. As a student facing particularly demanding exams, his test anxiety manifested as a quality he described as jagged red borders, a sharp, gnawing sense of urgency that directly interfered with his ability to concentrate while studying. A colleague suggested a simple exercise. Before sitting down to study, spend a few minutes imagining that red anxiety being gradually covered by a peaceful blue, mentally observing how the sharp edges softened and blurred. Casimiro, skeptical but willing to try anything that might help, began practicing this exercise before each study session. The change wasn't instantaneous, but with consistent practice, he noticed that he could sit down to study with considerably greater concentration, without the constant interference of the throbbing anxiety that previously distracted him every few minutes. His exam performance improved remarkably, not because he had objectively studied for more hours, but because the quality of his concentration during those hours had changed radically. A third experience enriches this principle from the realm of interpersonal relationships. Genoveva, a woman going through a particularly contentious divorce, noticed that every conversation related to the division of assets produced a mental sensation she described as a dense, cold, metallic gray, almost as if her entire mind became heavy for hours after each exchange with lawyers. A close friend, familiar with these sensory work practices, suggested that before each call or meeting related to the legal process, she spend a few minutes imagining that metallic gray gradually transforming into a warm gold, not to deny the seriousness of the process, but to sustain it from a less exhausting internal state. Genoveva practiced this exercise consistently for several weeks. The change she noticed wasn't that the legal process became less complex, but rather that her ability to navigate it without feeling completely drained improved substantially. She began to negotiate with greater mental clarity, identifying compromises that her mind, previously clouded by the heavy grayness of the conflict, had failed to envision. The legal process concluded months later with an agreement that both parties considered reasonably fair, something Genoveva attributes, in part, to having maintained a much more manageable emotional balance throughout the entire process. Your subconscious mind, as you've learned throughout this journey, doesn't process logical arguments in the same way as your conscious mind. It understands images, sensations, and emotional nuances. When you deliberately work with the sensory quality of your thoughts, imagining colors, textures, and sensations that represent calmer states, you're not simply distracting yourself from the real problem. You're sending a direct message to the deeper regions of your mind, instructing them to process the situation from a state of greater clarity and less reactivity. This practice is especially helpful for worries you can't immediately resolve through direct action. Situations where the only thing truly within your control is how you internally handle the uncertainty. Instead of fighting the worrisome thought, which rarely works and often intensifies anxiety, you can work with its sensory quality, gradually softening its texture without denying its legitimate existence. Over time, this practice becomes almost automatic. The mind learns to recognize its own patterns of tension and, without excessive conscious effort, begins to offer them gentler nuances. It's worth pausing for a moment to consider why this technique works so well, specifically in the pre-sleep threshold. During the day, your critical mind remains alert, questioning every visualization exercise, wondering if imagining colors over your worries is truly beneficial. But in the minutes before sleep, this analytical vigilance naturally relaxes, opening a much wider window of receptivity. This is why the same practices that might feel forced or artificial at midday become remarkably effective when practiced right before bed. You don't need to convince your conscious mind that the exercise is valid. You simply need to offer it to your subconscious mind at the moment when it is most receptive to receiving it without resistance. You can apply this same principle of color and texture to positive emotions you wish to amplify, not just worries you wish to soften. When you feel genuine joy, curiosity, or enthusiasm, pause for a moment and notice what color, what light, what temperature you intuitively associate with that emotion. Many people describe joy as a bright gold, curiosity as a luminous green, and deep calm as an almost transparent blue. Practicing the conscious identification of these positive nuances, and not just corrective work on the negative ones, strengthens your overall ability to communicate accurately in the language your subconscious best understands. Tonight, identify a worry that has been on your mind with particular persistence. Without trying to resolve it or analyze it further, simply notice what sensory quality it has. What color, what texture, what temperature do you associate with it? Then, gently, imagine that quality being gradually bathed in a calming hue, perhaps a soft lavender, perhaps a deep blue, whichever feels most natural to you. Don't force the worry to disappear completely. Simply allow its intensity to soften as you drift off to sleep, trusting that tonight, your subconscious mind will receive this worry in a much gentler way than usual. Chapter 14. The Sound of Alignment. There is a dimension of your experience that rarely receives conscious attention, despite being constantly present. Sound, both that which you produce and that which surrounds you, acts as a powerful conduit, capable of reshaping your internal state in ways that go far beyond simple aesthetic pleasure or fleeting entertainment. It's not just the music you intentionally listen to, but something more subtle and constant. The tone of your own inner voice, the vibrational quality of the sounds that surround you, even the silent rhythms of your breathing. All of this composes a kind of continuous symphony that directly influences your emotional landscape, often without your conscious awareness. Fabiana discovered the transformative power of this sonic dimension almost by accident, during a particularly stressful period in her working life. Without any specific therapeutic intention, she began to hum softly while performing simple household chores, a habit she had as a child and which, without knowing exactly why, she spontaneously resumed during that difficult time. Over time, she noticed that these moments of spontaneous humming coincided with a remarkable sense of mental clarity that lingered even after the activity ended. She then began to experiment deliberately, incorporating small moments of mindful humming during transitions throughout the day, upon waking, before important meetings, and at the end of the workday. She didn't sing specific songs or follow any particular structure. She simply allowed her voice to find soft, spontaneous tones, letting the vibration itself do its silent work. The cumulative effect of this simple practice was surprising even to her. The stress that had previously built up steadily throughout the day seemed to dissolve more easily. Her decisions, particularly under pressure, felt clearer, less clouded by the reactive anxiety that had so often overwhelmed her before. Close colleagues began to comment that they perceived a different kind of calm in her, difficult to describe, but clearly noticeable. The journey of Ezekiel, a musician going through a period of professional stagnation, offers a particularly revealing, complementary perspective. For years, his relationship with music had been primarily technical, perfecting each note, each chord, with an almost obsessive precision that paradoxically had emptied his playing of the emotional warmth that had originally drawn him to the art of music. A mentor pointed out something that completely transformed his approach. Perfect technique without genuine emotional connection rarely produces the kind of resonance that truly moves both the performer and the listener. Ezekiel then began to experiment with playing not from a place of technical rigor, but from an intention of genuine connection, allowing each note to carry the true emotional weight of what he felt in the moment, regardless of whether this meant occasional minor technical imperfections. The change in his music was noticeable almost immediately, not only to him but to those who listened. His playing acquired a quality that audiences began to describe as authentic or moving, qualities that no amount of previous technical perfection had managed to convey. Collaborative opportunities that had previously seemed stalled began to arise with unexpected ease. His career, which had remained stagnant for years, began to flourish in a way he himself described as almost too natural to be real. A third testimony explores this teaching from a different angle. Rosalinda, an early childhood teacher, noticed that her classroom atmosphere seemed to change depending on the tone she used during the first few minutes of the morning. On days when her voice sounded tense, rushed, with a sharp, almost imperceptible tone, the children were restless, distracted, and difficult to guide. On days when she consciously lowered her voice and adopted a more melodic and measured tone when greeting the students, the entire classroom atmosphere seemed to soften, as if the children were responding, without realizing it, to the sound frequency rather than the literal content of her words. Rosalinda then began consciously preparing her voice before each day, dedicating a few minutes, even on her commute, to gently humming and finding a calm, vocal register. This simple practice transformed the overall dynamic of her classroom in a way that no previous change in teaching methodology had ever achieved. She understood, with a clarity she later shared with her colleagues, that young children, long before they grasp the meaning of words, respond intuitively to the vibration and tone in which they are spoken to. A principle that, in fact, applies equally to adults, though they rarely recognize it consciously. This experience illustrates a fundamental principle. The universe responds to the genuine frequency of your expression, not to the superficial perfection of its form. Your thoughts, emotions, and intentions are, in a literal sense, waves that extend beyond your conscious perception, constantly communicating with your surroundings in ways that rational logic is only beginning to comprehend. It's also important to understand why sound has such an immediate effect on our internal state, even compared to other emotional regulation practices. Unlike thought, which can be analyzed and debated internally for minutes or hours, sound vibrations act almost instantaneously on the nervous system, even before the conscious mind can conceptually interpret them. When you incorporate sound, whether your own or someone else's, as a conscious tool for alignment, you are using one of the most direct and least filtered channels of communication with your subconscious. This sonic practice also extends to how you choose your everyday auditory environment, beyond deliberate moments of mindful humming. The constant noise, digital notifications, and tension-laden conversations you passively absorb throughout the day all contribute to a soundscape that your nervous system continuously processes, even without your direct, conscious attention. Deliberately beginning to heal this sonic environment, reducing unnecessary noise and increasing moments of silence or truly harmonious music, is another way to work with this powerful vibrational dimension of your daily experience. Your subconscious mind is an extraordinarily sensitive receiver, always listening, always responding, not so much to what you explicitly verbalize, but to the underlying emotional tone that underlies those words. When you align your internal frequency through practices as simple as mindful humming or genuine vocalization, you create a field of resonance that directly influences the circumstances you attract into your experience. Tonight, before you fall asleep, allow your breath to naturally find a slow and steady rhythm, almost like a quiet melody. If you feel comfortable doing so, hum gently, without any specific melody in mind, letting the sound arise naturally from within. Don't try to make it sound any particular way. Simply allow the vibration itself to accompany your transition into sleep, trusting that tonight your inner frequency is silently aligning with the experience you genuinely wish to attract into your life. Chapter 15. The Truth Behind the Wait. We live in a culture that celebrates speed, constant action, and perpetual motion as synonymous with genuine progress. This belief, while useful in certain contexts, can become a profound obstacle when applied indiscriminately to processes that, by their very nature, require time, patience, and a very different kind of engagement. Active and trusting anticipation rather than constant, frantic action. There is a fundamental difference between passive waiting, fraught with anxiety and resignation, and what we might call confident waiting, an active state of inner readiness where you keep your intention clear while genuinely trusting that the process will unfold at the right time, not necessarily at the time your conscious mind considers ideal. Maricela experienced this distinction particularly clearly during the long job search process following a major restructuring in her industry. For the first few months, her approach was one of constant, almost frantic action. She sent out dozens of applications daily, obsessively checked her email every few minutes, and each day without a positive response became an additional source of anxiety that paradoxically seemed to carry over even into the interviews she did manage to secure. A significant change occurred when, exhausted by the unsustainable pace she had maintained for months, she decided to modify her approach, not abandoning the active job search altogether, but letting go of the constant anxiety that accompanied it. She began to dedicate specific, limited time each day to the job search, and deliberately devoted the rest of her time to activities that brought her genuine calm. Walks, reading, time with close friends, without allowing job worries to dominate every moment of her day. This transition wasn't easy or immediate. The anxiety had a deeply ingrained pattern that required constant practice to change. But gradually, Maricela noticed that the interviews she landed began to feel different, less burdened by the desperation that she had undoubtedly conveyed in subtle but perceptible ways to interviewers. Her body language, her tone of voice, even the quality of her answers reflected a genuine confidence that had simply been unavailable before, weighed down by constant anxiety. The offer she finally accepted came in a way she later described as surprisingly natural, through a connection she had established months earlier, a connection she likely would have neglected during her frantic job search, too focused on the constant stream of formal applications. Anastasio's journey offers a complementary perspective from the creative realm. For years, he harbored the dream of writing a novel, but each attempt was thwarted by constant doubts about whether the timing was right, whether he had enough experience, whether the publishing market was receptive. This pattern of persistent indecision, however, wasn't simply reasonable prudence. It was, at its core, fear disguised as careful analysis. A turning point came when Anastasio realized that confident waiting didn't mean indefinitely postponing action while waiting for perfect external conditions, but rather beginning to act from a place of genuine calm, trusting that the process would unfold properly even without prior guarantees of success. He began to write steadily, without the pressure of each page having to be perfect, simply trusting the natural development of his project. This new relationship with time completely transformed his creative experience. He no longer wrote from the anxiety of whether it would be good enough, but from the quiet confidence that it was developing exactly as it should. Months later, he completed a manuscript that, to his surprise, attracted genuine interest from several publishers, a result that his previous years of anxious indecision had never managed to produce. There is a third story that expands on this lesson from the perspective of personal health. Wilfredo, a middle-aged man diagnosed with a chronic condition requiring long-term treatment, initially approached each medical appointment with anxious impatience, demanding visible improvements week after week and emotionally breaking down whenever the results didn't align with his mental timeline. This pattern of constant impatience, as his doctor explained, seemed to correlate with higher levels of physiological stress, which paradoxically could interfere with his body's natural healing process. Wilfredo then decided to adopt a different approach, to continue rigorously following medical instructions, but to let go of the constant demand for immediate results, allowing his body to follow its own healing rhythm without the added pressure of anxiety. He began practicing, each night, a brief reflection of trust in his own body's process, acknowledging the silent work that was happening even when it wasn't visible from the outside. Months later, his medical progress showed a consistent improvement that his healthcare team described as remarkably stable, a recovery pattern that Wilfredo himself attributes, in part, to having stopped anxiously fighting against the natural timing of his own healing process. Your subconscious mind interprets constant anxiety as static that interferes with clearly communicating your intentions, while sustained confidence acts as a clear and precise signal. When you learn to actively wait, keeping your intention clear without the constant strain of urgency, you create the necessary internal conditions for the right opportunities to align at the right time, a time that rarely coincides exactly with the timeline your conscious mind had designed. It's important to distinguish between the confident waiting described here and mere passivity disguised as spiritual patience. Active waiting doesn't mean sitting idly by. It means continuing to act with reasonable consistency toward your goals, while letting go of the anxious demand to control the exact time and manner in which the results will manifest. It's the difference between planting seeds each season with discipline and trusting the natural process of growth versus planting nothing at all and waiting for a harvest that will never come. It is worth noting that this confident waiting is considerably strengthened when combined with the practices from the previous chapters. Gratitude for what is already present, emotional coherence sustained from the heart, and release from excessive control. None of these practices truly works in isolation. They reinforce one another, creating an increasingly stable inner state that is less dependent on immediate external circumstances to maintain its equilibrium. Tonight, reflect on an area of your life where anxious impatience has been particularly intense. Before you sleep, allow yourself to release even if only temporarily, the urgency associated with that process. Mentally repeat, I relax into the perfect timing of my own process. Let this phrase soften any tension that has built up in your body as you surrender to rest, trusting that tonight's confident waiting is in itself an active and powerful form of participation in your own manifestation. Chapter 17, Invisible Elections. You have reached the end of this journey, though in reality, you are only at the beginning of something that will continue to unfold long after you close this book. Throughout the previous 16 chapters, you have learned that your subconscious listens, that your dreams reflect, that your heart transmits, that your voice vibrates, that your patience creates space, that your faith attracts, that your nights work, that your inner dialogue builds, that your gratitude magnetizes, that your reality reflects, that your perseverance cultivates, that your emotions invest, that your thoughts have color, that your sound aligns, that your waiting trusts, and that your forgiveness liberates. This final chapter brings all these threads together around one final truth, perhaps the most important of all. Every moment of your daily life is composed of invisible choices, decisions so small and so constant that you rarely recognize them as choices at all. And yet it is precisely these repeated micro-decisions that, added together over weeks and months, end up determining the entire direction of your existence. Consider the difference between a dramatic, big life change and the quiet accumulation of small, daily decisions. Popular culture tends to glorify the former, the heroic moment of sudden transformation, the bold decision that changes everything overnight. But the far less cinematic, far more powerful truth is that most genuine and lasting transformations occur through invisible choices repeated consistently. The choice to think a kind thought instead of a critical one. The choice to breathe deeply instead of reacting impulsively. The choice to be grateful instead of complaining. The choice to let go instead of anxiously clinging. Romulus, a man who, after a significant health crisis, decided to completely transform his relationship with his own well-being, understood this principle particularly clearly. Upon leaving the hospital, he felt the temptation, like many people in his situation, to establish a long list of drastic changes: a completely new diet, an intense exercise routine, a total reorganization of his work life. He tried to implement everything simultaneously, and as often happens with overly ambitious changes, he collapsed within weeks, exhausted and discouraged, feeling that he had failed again. A nutritionist offered her a different perspective. Instead of trying to transform her entire life at once, she could focus on a single, invisible choice each day. Something so small, it was almost impossible to fail at. For the first week, her only commitment was to drink an extra glass of water each morning before her coffee. Nothing more. No dramatic changes, no severe restrictions, just that one small choice, repeated with complete consistency. Building on that solid foundation, Romulus began adding, week after week, a new invisible choice. A 10-minute walk after dinner, turning off screens half an hour before bed, dedicating a few minutes to the nightly gratitude he had learned in previous chapters of his own inner transformation. Each individual choice seemed insignificant at the time. But after a year, the accumulation of these invisible decisions had completely transformed his energy, his mental clarity, and his physical health markers in a way that no dramatic, temporary change could have sustained. The journey of Serafina, a woman who rebuilt her career after a devastating job loss, illustrates this same principle from a professional standpoint. Instead of frantically pursuing every available opportunity, she decided to apply the lesson of invisible choices. Each day, she dedicated time to a single, small, consistent action in the direction she genuinely wanted for her career. Whether it was learning a new skill for 20 minutes, contacting a single person in her professional network, or simply reflecting clearly on what kind of work truly energized her rather than drained her. These individually modest choices accumulated over months, building a solid foundation of knowledge, contacts, and inner clarity that ultimately led her to an opportunity she described as the most aligned of her entire career. What's remarkable about her story isn't the final opportunity itself, but the quiet, invisible process of daily choices that made it possible. A process that, viewed from the outside, probably seemed far less dramatic than the story she would eventually tell about her professional transformation. There's a profound reason why these small, repeated choices have so much power over your subconscious mind, far more than grand resolutions that rarely last more than a few weeks. Your subconscious mind isn't convinced by one-off dramatic pronouncements. It's reprogrammed by constant repetition, by the accumulating evidence of a new pattern sustained over time. Every time you choose, even in a seemingly insignificant decision, to act from calm rather than panic, from gratitude rather than complaint, from confidence rather than fear, you're offering your subconscious a new piece of evidence about who you truly are. Evidence that accumulated night after night, day after day, eventually becomes your genuine identity, not just a distant, aspirational ideal. This means you don't need to wait for a perfect or dramatic moment to begin your transformation. Every present moment, however ordinary it may seem, contains an invisible choice available to you. How you respond to a minor setback, the tone you use when speaking to yourself after a small mistake, the decision to express gratitude for a simple gesture in the midst of a busy day. None of these individual choices will change your life overnight, but all of them, sustained with patience and loving consistency toward yourself, are precisely the stuff of the deepest and most lasting transformations. Tonight, as you prepare for your final sleep with this book as your constant companion, I'm not asking you to memorize every principle from every previous chapter. I'm asking for something much simpler, and precisely for that reason, much more powerful. Choose, in this present moment, just one small intention for tomorrow. It doesn't need to be grand. It can be as simple as genuinely smiling when you wake up, or drinking water mindfully, or whispering a word of gratitude before you get out of bed. Whisper to yourself, I choose, in the small things, who I want to be. Allow this simple intention to gently dissolve into your breath as you surrender to sleep, trusting that the invisible choices of this night and all the nights to come are silently building the life you truly wish to inhabit. And that's all for today. But if you feel like we're just scratching the surface, don't worry. The first link in the description gives you access to more advanced content that can make a real difference. Thanks for being here, for believing in yourself, and we'll see you in the next video.